So, hi everyone. Please join me in welcoming Ben Phillips, vegetable crops educator for the Southwest Michigan Research and Extension Center. Ben, thank you so much for being here. Can you start out by telling us just a bit about yourself?
My name is Ben, and well, you know this already, but I went to graduate school at Ohio State for entomology, and I went there after a degree in fisheries and wildlife at Michigan State. And now I work with vegetable growers in Michigan again, back in my home state.
That's great. So, can you just tell us a little bit about the day-to-day of your work life, and kind of what a typical day looks like, if you even have a typical day?
Yeah, uh, it's changed as my career has gone on, but it started with a lot of driving, lots of driving to visit people, vegetable farms, and to get my face out there. And then some word of mouth then started to take over for a lot of that cold call type approach. So people would hear about me from other growers, or I would write some stuff that would go on the website, and then that would get out and people would see it and start to make connections. And that was all on the east side of Michigan. And now on the west side of Michigan, which I started in April, I got thrown right into somebody else's old program. The guy before me had a lot of stuff going on, and I came in right after him. And so there was a lot to learn of what he did and how to continue it. And so this season has been far less driving. It's been a lot of staying on the research farm and doing projects that happen here. And it's been a bit different. I've gotten some phone calls. Still, most of them are from the east side, and there's a ton of planning all the time, all year round, for different things. Like now is meeting planning time, and in the spring it's a lot of summer planning time, and in the summer it's a lot of just executing the plan. And in the winter there's a lot of writing in addition to the meetings that you have planned in the fall.
Right.
So that's kind of the cycle of things. It ends up being a lot more computer time than you think. Summer's where you get most of your travel in and get to see stuff growing and all that.
Yeah, right. So in the summer, would you say that you have a typical 9 to 5 career, or are you working all hours of the day? Do you have to respond to any emergency calls?
Mm. Well, something about working on a salary is that you work a lot outside of typical hours because you're not reporting hours. It also means you don't work a lot during typical hours. Um, Sometimes you can, it's just really flexible. And with extension, you don't have a boss looking right over your shoulder either. So there's a lot of flex time that goes unreported and understood because there's plenty of evening jobs. There's a lot of weekend stuff, particularly in the winter. There's a lot of different philosophies on like when meetings should happen to
Mhm.
get different audiences, and weekends are a time that it's on the table.
Right.
So there's a lot of weekend work that tends to creep in on the winters. And in my role on the east side, I didn't have as much like help for doing trials and things, and so I would do weekends in August every year to do pickle harvest and stuff. But over here on the west side, it's different. This research station has a lot more of like a fruit vegetable culture going on, and there's a lot of support, and we can get everything done within the span of a week during the summertime. Like weekdays is enough, and my hours have been easier to fit into a normal day as well because of that support.
Right.
But different people in different extension jobs have different levels of support, and so sometimes you end up working late. And your life situation changes too. Like on the east side, when I started, I didn't have kids, and for a while, my wife lived in Cincinnati, so I just didn't have very good time management, and I got a lot of like social food
Hmm.
from just diving into the job,
Right.
like really putting my identity into it. And as I've gotten older and I have two kids, I protect my time a little more than I used to.
Right. Yeah, that's great to hear. And it's interesting to hear how somebody's career can change in a short amount of time like that. Would you say that you have a preference for your summer work versus your winter work? Or is it kind of fun to change it up throughout the year and it keeps things fresh?
Oh, it's essential to change it up. I don't
Mhm.
know how anybody works in the South where the season is continual and there's uh no like focus change. I
Yeah.
don't I really don't understand it. I can't wrap my head around it one single bit that you can be producing crops and having to do all the crop producing type stuff that you might do as a crop researcher or an advisor, and
Right.
then also try to plan for grant cycles
Mhm.
and ways to showcase what it is you've done with meetings. I just don't get it at all. So in the wintertime, I greatly appreciate the change ups.
Yeah.
Or sorry, up north here, I greatly appreciate the change ups. And in the winter, I like performing. I like performing my material. I like to think of the job as entertainment in some ways.
Mhm.
A lot of scientists don't think of it that way, but that's exactly what it is, and that's why sometimes scientific messages are lost, because
Right.
if you're just delivering to a scientific audience, then delivering it scientifically probably works. But just delivering it to growers and the public, you gotta you gotta handle it differently. And I really like it. I like that. I
Yeah.
like doing a performance of material. In the wintertime gives me a chance to kind of do things and like try them in different ways and reformat. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why your type of position is so vital to the kind of work that you do, because you need to be a liaison between the researchers who are so niche in their subject and maybe have a hard time communicating with the people who really need it most. So your position is really vital for that. What kind of opportunities would you say you have to do your presentations? Like, do you do a lot of formal presentations, or would you say you do mostly one-on-one consultation with growers?
Well, it's I don't know what percentage I would. It's hard to measure that in percentage or anything, because in a meeting, of course, you get more people.
Right.
And if you're thinking about it in terms of people, then you'll probably you're probably delivering more in a crowd setting than you are one on one.
Right.
But by far, like in terms of just like interaction time or like blocking out your calendar for different things, it's the one on one stuff that takes far more time, because there's a lot of sometimes there's transportation to visit a person.
Mhm.
There's a lot of background digging that I do when if someone can give me a heads up about why I'm visiting, what they want me to come out for, it's unavoidable for me to start digging into it before I go.
Right.
And then other times I get the question and it's a lot of, I know some things, but I got to follow up with some other research, and that takes a lot of time, and it's just for one person.
Yeah.
I spend sometimes as much working on a single issue that someone's approached me with as I might for like a short 30-minute presentation. It's like that much goes into one-on-ones. And some people find that too taxing, but I
Right.
think the impacts are far greater.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and being able, like, knowing who to reach out to is one of the most important skills, I think, for your position. But what would you say the most valuable skill is?
Hmm. Well,
If you had to narrow it down.
yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to be said about grad school in how it enforces you to find information in certain ways.
Mhm.
And for a long time, I felt like graduate school was was really difficult, and I did not want to go farther into a PhD because I didn't feel like I felt like I was seeing like a game, and I didn't want to participate in it anymore. But as I have left that and now I'm in a career where I'm doing a lot of learning in more unstructured ways, I what sticks with me about graduate school is how how I learned to find information that other people don't have.
Right.
And that's really what is stuck with me through graduate school, is looking for information and vetting it. And
Right.
that's what's stuck with me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. So, what's your least favorite thing about your career?
Oh man. Well, reporting.
Yeah.
It's really hard to look back on things. I think everybody sort of does it. Everyone knows when they've done something great and when they've done something that they've learned from. Everything's a learning experience. But aside from just kind of ruminating on it,
Mhm.
most people don't really like write it up in any formal sense.
Right.
And it's really hard to make time for it. And the process for doing that in a formal way in
Mhm.
our jobs, it's always changing. So as soon as you come up with a way that you feel like, okay, all right, this is an easy way for me to do it because I'll remember it and I got a little bit of flow going that it makes it easy for me to report.
Yeah, right.
Then the way that they want you to give them the information changes, and then everything's just dashed, and it's like it's really
So
frustrating.
I can imagine. Yeah, but for any listeners who may not know, can you just tell us a little bit about what reporting is and why it's important for extension?
Yeah. Well, extension originally came from some federal acts, the Morrill Act, the Hatch Act, and the Smith-Lever Act. And between those three, essentially, the universities across the nation that get these land grants are getting federal dollars and also state dollars and county dollars too. So there's it's a very small percentage now. Like overall, extension's budget is about 30% coming from those taxpayer dollars, and the remainder is all from grants and contracts
Mm.
and service agreements. So it's always shrinking, like it's never getting higher. But because some of that money's coming from taxpayer bases, we have to report on everything that we do because it's using public resources.
Right. Okay, thank you so much for that explanation. Well, now that we've heard a little bit about your least favorite part of your career, do you have a most favorite aspect of your career?
I still get a lot out of this. Like I get a lot of social food from
Mhm.
interacting with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and it's as broad as that. I think that's my favorite part, really. Uh, I think maybe second to that is working in R, which is stupid, but I love it. And
Yeah,
I can waste infinite amounts of time in R just trying to new code, trying
yeah,
to trim it down so that it's just a smooth operating thing. And every year it changes. And I've got to like retweak some things. An experiment takes a different format, right? And then you got to figure out like, that same analysis isn't going to work here.
yeah,
It takes a lot of time, but it seems like I can forget the world exists for a while and just dive into that. But
yeah. So
there's
did you
different.
first learn R in grad school?
That's where I started. Yep. I
And
learned SAS in a class and then I threw it right out the window pretty quickly uh, and got into R on my own, no class.
God,
Um,
that's impressive.
yeah. There's a SAS joke that I like to tell. It's just run,
That's a great one.
get
Yeah.
away from here, get away from there.
Yeah, I struggle with it too. Did you expect to need to know programming language or use R or SAS or anything like that in your current career and
Had
extent?
no idea. Nope. No clue that was coming.
Yeah, so that was a big surprise, I bet. When did you learn that that was going to be a part of your career? How did you take it? How did you feel at the time?
Hmm. Good question. It seeped in. It seeped in around my second year of graduate school. I took a GIS class and I loved it. And it was a lot about database management, which is I didn't understand that what I was doing is database management. I had spreadsheets, I had rows and columns, I was doing unions,
Right.
and joins and things like that, and understanding the difference. And that was sort of how I got introduced to data management. And then I just became a huge Excel nerd, and I was doing a lot of stuff in Excel, figuring out equations and ways to make calculations happen automatically for me. And then you reach a limit where you're like, oh man, it's really hard, and this Excel's like crashing because it's doing too many things.
Right.
And then code becomes this thing that can remedy your situation, and that's when I got into that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So would you say that that was one of the most valuable skills that you took away from grad school into your career, or would you say that is there any one other experience that was most valuable to your success now?
Yeah, well, so I already said earlier, finding information was a good thing, a good residual from graduate school. The coding was as well. And then the last thing could be the most important, really, is fake it till you make it.
That's a great one.
I heard no, my professor didn't tell me those words, but it was easy to see. That's
Yeah,
how you succeed. You just you need to, if you don't have confidence in what you're doing,
yeah,
you need to fake it until you make it and grin and bear some things because uh man, it's just so hard to not feel like an imposter.
yeah, it really is.
Graduate school was a it can really screw with your head.
Yeah,
You're working at like it feels like just a crucible, you know? And you
yeah,
can feel like, man, I don't measure up, but you're learning, and learning hurts. I don't think that most people recognize that. Uh they feel it, but they might not put a word to it. Learning is painful, just
yeah,
like physical injuries are painful.
right. Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought of that. But once you heal from an injury, you're stronger. And you could say the same thing about learning.
Yep.
Great way to think about it. So after grad school, did you immediately jump into extension work or did you do anything in between? Like kind of what was your path?
I learned about extension from my fisheries and wildlife degree. They really had a strong emphasis on it. And I was really interested in it from then. And I chose a grad school program that required grower cooperators
Great.
because I wanted to do stuff that was applied. I was by the end of my undergrad, I was super interested in tree hoppers, which are a really cool bug, just amazing. They're still really wrap me up with
Yes.
how cool they are. And I was looking for programs about them,
Cool.
and I just thought it's feels very self-serving. This isn't going to help anybody to learn more about like how they communicate through like tapping on branches. Like,
Right.
cool, I love it, but like no one else is really going to care. And so I wanted to do something that was a little more applied,
Right.
something that other people could pick up and be like, oh, I can make use of this information. So I went into this program that looked at pumpkin systems, and it's a lot of P words, which isn't good for mics like this, right? So it's like pumpkins and predators and parasitoids and
Cool.
yeah, as a pollinators too, is all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it involved lots of on-farm cooperation. So I really got into that,
Awesome.
driving around and introducing myself and pitching a project and running it. It was fun. And so
Yeah.
from there, I wanted to keep doing that. And a
Yeah.
job opened in Michigan that I applied for before I graduated. I think I had like 3 months left or something.
That's
And
great.
they decided that they'd wait. They they wanted me and they'd wait until I graduated.
That's awesome. That worked out really well for you then.
Yeah, I was lucky, I think.
If or like speaking of the applied nature of your work, what would you say like the broader societal value of your work is?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of the applied aspect of your work and coming up with real-time solutions for growers, would you say that there's a broader societal value to your work in general or the field that you work in?
I think there's a piece of extension work that's a bit underappreciated and something we don't necessarily get paid for, but we're therapists.
Yeah, that's so true.
We we go and we visit farms,
Mhm.
and with a shrinking farm base, fewer people farming, there's fewer people to talk to about farming,
Right.
and they're more likely your competitors.
Mhm.
And so just to have somebody who's like just a dork about what you're doing come to your farm and just sit and listen to you is very helpful, I think, to some people's mental states.
Yeah, right.
A lot of times they don't get to leave the farm. Vegetable farmers in particular are so dang busy.
Right.
They have to do a whole crop cycle every year. of several different crops, and they're just constantly planting or harvesting.
Mhm.
And so when you show up and they're like, so what's going on?
Yeah,
How do I look compared to anyone else? I haven't seen anything.
right.
And you can, yeah, it's really helpful, I think, to just be a good listener on some of these farms, make people feel like they're not alone.
Yeah,
They're having problems and they're not the only people having them. And there are solutions, and here are some.
right.
It's really nice. It's a good
Yeah, and so
feeling.
that is. And just ensuring them that being a grower, being a farmer is hard, and they're actively involved in the research and learning process, and we're kind of all learning together, and I'm sure it just makes them feel less alone.
That's something you don't learn in the graduate school part, even if you're just doing applied research. But once you get on and you're dealing with actual people one on one or in small group settings,
Right,
it's that's another reason why I consider a lot of what I do as performance, because you're affecting people, you're affecting their emotions. That's what you need to be speaking to,
right,
not their logic. You need to be speaking to their emotions, and you have to build trust.
right.
And that doesn't always come out of a science degree.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And we always think of science as being so clear cut, but when you're bringing it back to the grower or in any extension position, whoever your stakeholder is, their livelihood is dependent on their what they learn from you and what decisions and management practices they end up implementing. And so it's not as clear cut to them. It's not as black and white. Um, so I think it's great the way you approach that.
yeah. I actually, Hannah had a bunch of entomology people come together a couple weeks, months ago now, to talk a little bit about things that things that might be useful for graduate students. And we talked a little bit about this human dimension, and that's actually the name of a course in the Fisheries and Wildlife Department that
Oh,
I took. It was all about that.
yeah,
And that was when I was first introduced to it. And then when I was in graduate school, no one ever talked about it
yeah,
in any formal sense. But because my job was to work with individual growers, then I got, some, you know, off the books type learning on that.
yeah,
But the only formal training I heard directly focusing on how relationships between other humans have a huge part in everything was that
right.
human dimensions course. It's all about how land management is basically an emotional decision, especially when it comes to like public spaces where everyone's a stakeholder.
Right.
Emotion is run wild.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and empathy is important in any career, but I would say especially in extension, it's a invaluable quality to have. Do you have a favorite memory from your time as an extension educator?
hmm hmm I've got a Yeah, there's a few. There's one that always makes me chuckle. There's a fella over in Saginaw when I first started on the east side. He was a sweet corn grower. It's the only vegetable he grew, and he just did a bunch of field crops on outside of that. And he just feels he always from the day I met him, he felt like one of my best friends.
Awesome.
And he's like far older than me. I don't know exactly what his age is, but he just got a hip replaced. If that indicates an age, older than me. And he's got grandkids and stuff, and he took me under his wing on the sweet corn side of things, and was really interested in participating in my projects and stuff. And he had me come out one day, or I asked to come out, and for him to show me uh, how to decide what sweet corn is ripe, because you can't see it through the wrapper. So
Right,
how do you know just by feeling it that it's ripe and ready? And he's
right.
like, "Yeah, come out. I got all the kids working. They'll show you what's up." So the way he does it is he's got a loader tractor out there, and then he's got several people going in and out of the corn with like Home Depot buckets. And I call those buckets. And this is the memory. This is the good memory.
Okay.
I, I was picking corn into buckets. I was learning how to tell it was ripe. I pick them into buckets, and his grandson was like and this kid's like, I don't know, he must have been like 10. He was my teacher.
That's
And
awesome.
and I kept saying bucket. I'm putting corn into the bucket. I'm like, so I bring the bucket over to the loader, and he looked at me with like such a stern face, and he said, "That's a pail. What you're holding is a pail. The bucket is on the tractor."
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, "Okay." All right, I have learned that. This is a pail and that's the bucket. This, what I'm holding is not the bucket.
Yeah.
And I mean, this kid was 10. He learned it from his grandpa, and that was canon, right?
Yes.
And it kind of demonstrated to me a little bit on delivery of messaging. Like if you're doing a presentation and you're talking about buckets instead of pails, like that will just turn somebody off.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's crazy how little a thing will turn someone off. Like that's not, I'm not going to listen anymore because you don't use the words that I use.
Right. Yeah, lingo is really important, especially
Mhm.
in this field. And I think that's great that had you not asked to go help pick the sweet corn and had his grandson not been there, that's a new thing that you might not have ever learned. So that is a really, really cool memory. Thanks so much for sharing it.
Mhm.
It's really fun. So to wrap it all up, I'd just like to ask what your biggest recommendation for someone in my position, my stage of life, what would you say is your biggest recommendation?
Well, graduate school can consume you where that's all you do. And you have like hours technically that you keep during the day. You go to class and you go to the lab, and then your after hours can easily become more graduate school stuff because there's just no end to what you can do. I recommend you make a hard line somewhere and you do something that is really like engaging a different part of your brain. And for me, it was this doesn't really have much to do with future career. It's more about just like maintaining your mental health through graduate school. Uh, I ended up like finding these two older guys who played ukulele, and we started a band, and I'd never really done that ever before, so it was totally new to me, and I just faked it once again, like
Yeah,
I was in graduate school. I was just faking that too, but it helped so much because it was the only way to not think about graduate school for me. It was the
right,
only way to just not do it. And it doesn't matter what it is that you do. It could be like biking or fishing or something, just something.
right.
You got to do something.
Something that just completely removes you from the work and gives your brain a break, right?
Yeah. And I think that if it involves people, that's even better because then it reconnects you with the fact that we're emotional beings. And if it's a solo pursuit, that's fine. But like if you're interested in going on to a future of working with people,
Mhm.
then I think whatever you do that removes you from the graduate school like tornado,
Right,
it should involve just other people that, and then just forget about what you're stressed about
right,
and focus on another person or group. It feels really good. It feels good. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to title it therapy, but that's what it ends up being.
right. That was really fantastic advice. I really needed to hear that because I personally I'm in the tornado and I know a lot of my peers are. So I think we're all going to get a lot of use out of that
Geez,
advice.
especially if you're in here from out of country, man, that's like the sole thing. It's really hard. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
if you have fellow students like that, uh, it's nice to offer them a way out sometimes. Go bowling, something, I don't know, but don't talk about graduate school.
right. Talk about personal interests. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's great. We definitely will. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much for coming on and letting me interview you. It was so great to learn about you and your career and get some advice from you. And I just really appreciate your willingness to share.
no problem. Anytime.